Chapter 6. Jean Siming was greeted with a pungent and acidic smell the moment she entered the bathroom. She frowned, her brows furrowed as she covered her nose and mouth. She raised her eyes to see a girl standing near the sink who was pulling on the suppressant sticker on her neck. "Hey, please follow the rules and don't cause trouble for others." Jean Siming stared in disdain at the alpha girl who had allowed her pheromones to leak so badly. When the girl heard her, she smiled in embarrassment. Sorry about that. The sticker was just a little too tight, so I wasn't feeling very comfortable." After saying so, she reattached the sticker onto her neck. After covering her neck, the pungent smell wasn't so obvious anymore, but Jean Siming still stood at the door and waited for the smell to completely disappear before going in. Does it really smell that bad? I just differentiated recently, so I'm not familiar with some things. I'm really sorry about that just now. Oh, by chance, are you an alpha too? Jean Siming had thought the girl was a little airhead at first, but now she thinks there might also be a pit inside this girl's brain. What do you think? This is the alpha restroom after all. She gave the girl a dumbfounded look and then headed towards a stall. When she came out of the stall, she found the same girl still standing there and staring at her. "Hello, my name is Chapter6. What's yours?" When the girl saw her coming out, she immediately stretched out her hand and introduced herself. Jean Siming frowned and glared speechlessly at this strange alpha. Please, they've only exchanged 2 sentences, and now she's acting all friendly. And who would want to make friends in the bathroom? Is this girl going crazy? After coming to the conclusion that there was definitely something wrong with this girl's mind, Jean Siming stopped paying attention to her and went straight to the sink to turn on the faucet. Seeing the impatient look on Jean Siming's face, the girl quickly explained herself. "Sorry, I didn't mean anything strange by that. I just wanted to know what my pheromones smell like." "Is it really that bad?" Jean Siming turned her head to look at her and then said, "Yes, it really smells that bad. Like the smell of burnt gasoline." The girl opened her mouth in surprise after listening to this statement and then lowered her head in disappointment. Her reaction was to be expected. After all, which person would not feel uncomfortable after hearing that their pheromones smell like gasoline? Jean Siming shook the water from her hand and turned to leave when suddenly the girl grabbed her arm and leaned forward. An alpha's instinct subconsciously repels other alphas, so as soon as the girl approached, Jean Siming was filled with an unfamiliar sense of disgust and immediately pushed the other away. Bang! Chapter6 fell to the floor with a loud bang. She rubbed her aching buttocks. "You're so strong." "Fortunately, my physique has improved a lot after the differentiation, otherwise I would have been sent to the school's infirmary from that one push." "What the hell is wrong with you? What are you doing, coming so close to me?" Jean Siming exploded in anger. The disgusted feeling just now made her entire body feel very uncomfortable, and she subconsciously concluded that those feelings must be due to the alpha who touched her just now. "Sorry. I thought that since we're both girls that it wouldn't matter that much. I just wanted to see what your scent smelled like, since I wanted to know what another alph's scent is like." "And do they all smell so unpleasant?" Chapter6 sat on the ground and looked up at her innocently. Jean Siming. Although she was angry, Jean Siming was also really curious about what her scent smelled like. "Then did you smell it?" she asked fiercely. Well, a little bit, but it really is stinky." Boom. Jean Siming felt as if a thunderbolt struck her in the head. Her scent is stinky? How could it be stinky? When lunchtime came around, Jean Siming was still wallowing in her self-pity after receiving that deep blow to her ego in the bathroom. Su Xiaohang couldn't stand her gloominess anymore, and dropped a pack of soft sweets next to her. "You were so happy this morning, but now you're depressed? Here, eat some sweets and you'll feel better." Jean Siming stuffed 2 pieces of candies in her mouth, the sweet and then sour taste spreading over her taste buds. If only my pheromones would smell as sweet as these sweets." "Ah? The smell of your pheromones? What does our Mingbao scent smell like?" Su Xiaohang asked, curiously. Jean Siming would never admit to other people that her scent smells stinky, and she nervously reached up to brush against the suppressant sticker on her neck. She looked away as she answered, "I'm not sure yet." "Huh? So you can't even tell what your own scent smells like?" Su Xiaohang hasn't differentiated yet, and never listens during the basic biology class, so to her, differentiation and everything related to it was a very novel thing. Beansprout, do you not know what your scent smells like either? Hurry up and teach me the science, the ignorant masses here need the teacher's help. Su Xiaohang kicked the chair in front of them. Lu Qi had taken out his lunch and was about to eat it when he was kicked by his annoying deskmate behind him. He sighed and turned around. "Loudspeaker Su, I am only going to tell you this once, so listen closely. The smell of one's pheromones is a very personal thing. Unless it is someone you are very close with, it is considered rude to ask others what their pheromones smell like. Do you understand? It's a very embarrassing thing for others to hear you say, and you asked so loudly just now." Su Xiaohang quickly covered her mouth when she heard his words and glanced around. Fortunately, it was lunch break and the classroom was very noisy. And since they sat in the corner of the last row, nobody noticed. "So that's how it is. Then pretend I didn't ask. But how come you can't smell your own pheromones even after differentiation? One can smell their own pheromones, but they won't be able to distinguish any particular scent from them. They'll only be able to tell how intense the pheromones they're pumping out are. In fact, the so-called scent you speak of does not exist objectively in this world. Kinda like how there is no such thing as colors in this world, but we still see them because of the different refraction of light. To put it more precisely, it is simply our eyes deceiving us. Similarly, the scent of pheromones depends largely on our perceptual cognition. For example, two alphas will repel each other while an alpha and omega will attract each other. If an alpha smells the pheromones of another alpha, to them it is a sour and unpleasant smell. But to the olfactory sense of an omega, it is a sweet and addictive smell. After listening to Teacher Lu's lecture, Jean Siming broke out of her gloom. In other words, no matter what an alpha scent smells like, to a fellow alpha it can only ever be a pungent smell, perhaps even described as stinky? Lu Qing nodded. "Yes, you can put it that way as well." Jean Siming breathed a sigh of relief. So she doesn't have to worry about her pheromones being called stinky ever again. However, now that she thinks about it, although she doesn't listen seriously in biology class, she has never missed any important points. So why does Lu Qi know all this, but she doesn't? She couldn't help but ask, are these things taught in class? How come I don't remember this? These are not in our textbooks exactly. You should read some more books in your free time to expand your knowledge. A suspicious blush appeared on Lu Qi's face, and he immediately turned around after he finished speaking. Then he laid down on the table as if he was going to take a nap. Teacher Lu seemed to have blushed just now. Su Xiaohang pretended to be surprised. Teacher Lu deserves to be called an encyclopedia. He knows everything. I really benefited a lot from listening to Teacher Lu's little lecture just now. However, I wonder what kind of books Teacher Lu usually reads to have such a thorough understanding of this subject. After saying this, she winked at Jean Siming. Jean Siming caught on that her friend was teasing Lu Qi again, however she didn't help her this time. This is because no matter how strange the books Teacher Lu has secretly read, she is still thankful towards him. Otherwise she would have really thought she smelled stinky for the rest of the day. But fortunately, she isn't stinky at all. Chapter 7. The changes between the 4 seasons in the city is not very obvious. The climate is perpetually warm throughout the year, and even in the coldest of winters, the temperature outside rarely dips below 5 degrees Celsius 41 degrees Fahrenheit. Therefore, in the middle of March, despite the other parts of the country still being rather cold, most people in the city were already wearing shorts and t-shirts. Jean Siming pushed her bike out of the bike rack area and walked slowly alongside the green lawns leading to the school gate. A few gusts of cool wind would breeze by from time to time, gently curling up the ends of her hair and generally giving off a comfortable and refreshing feeling. In the early spring, the temperature is neither cold nor hot, and can be considered the most comfortable time of the year, and the perfect time for outdoor activities. Jean Siming usually didn't allow the driver to come pick her up on these days and choose to ride to and from school on her own bike, taking advantage of the weather to get in some more exercise. When she arrived at the school gate, a few heads of blonde hair caught her attention. These people had a sullen yet rowdy air to them, with fierce looks on their faces as cigarettes dangled from their mouths. However, their faces were still young and immature, and they didn't dare to directly head into the school. Jean Siming estimated that a good 80% of them were students from the vocational high school next door. There is a vocational high school very close to their school, and the more bullheaded students of the two schools would often break out into fights. Although Jean Siming hasn't personally witnessed such group fights break out, she has heard quite a bit about it among the school's gossip. Today was her first time bumping into these so-called delinquents at the school gate, however she merely glanced at them with curiosity before turning to leave. She is, after all, not a person who likes to join in on such troublesome things. Suddenly, the handlebars of her bike were grabbed by a pair of white hands, and a slightly familiar scent appeared with the materialization of these hands. "Classmate Jean, give me a ride." Jean Siming slowly raised her head, and Yao Jin's familiar pair of fox eyes met her gaze. She straightened up, taking full advantage of her height to widen the gap between them, and lifted her lips as she looked down at Yao Jin with a condescending sneer. "Did I hear that right? You want me to give you a ride?" "Yes, you've heard it right. Classmate Jean, you're young enough that you shouldn't doubt your ears. I'll trouble you to just take me out of the school gate. You can drop me off at the first intersection on the left." What the heck? Who asks someone for a ride and ridicules them at the same time? Even if Jean Siming was riding an alpaca, she wouldn't give this person a ride. Jean Siming didn't even bother wearing a fake smile anymore and got onto her bike. She shook her handlebars. "Even if you were the last person in the world, I wouldn't give you a ride." However, no matter how violently she shook her bike, Yao Jin still clung tightly to her bike. "Jean Siming, if you help me this one time, I will promise you anything. As long as it's within my ability, I promise I'll fulfill any of your requests." This offer was quite tempting. If Yao Jin promises that she'll do anything, then she can ask Yao Jin to run laps around the school's playground while barking like a dog, or do 100 leapfrog jumps, or even do push-ups under the school's flagpole in front of everyone. She could think of 10,000 different ways to humiliate Yao Jin. But, what would make Yao Jin so desperate enough to make this deal? Desperate enough that all she had to do was give her a ride? This fox will never let herself suffer one-sidedly. There must be some sort of trap involved. "How about it, classmate Jean? Won't you give me a ride?" Yao Jin still wore a sunny smile on her face, but her emotions were unreadable to the point that Jean Siming was even more convinced that this matter was not as simple as it seems. So she sighed and said, "If the earth stopped spinning, then maybe I'll give you a ride, but she pointed to the rear of her bicycle, "my bike doesn't have a back seat to sit on, so I can't give anyone a ride. Now, can you let go? I want to go home." Yao Jin studied her bike, then raised her chin towards the front of the bike. "Ah, it's okay, I can sit in the front." "You mean here?" Jean Siming pointed to the thin bar between her handlebars. Her expression seemed to ask, "Are you dreaming?" As she said in disbelief, "Girl, are you kidding me? If your butt sits on that, it's going to break, okay?" Hey, what are you doing?" Before Jean Siming could react, Yao Jin had already leaped onto the front of her bike. Suddenly the gentle embrace of a tempting and alluring sweet scent wrapped around her, scaring Jean Siming into loosening her grip on her handlebars. She raised her hands and quickly moved backwards, as if the person in the front was an extremely dangerous person that would kill her if she so much as touched her. "Why you dash? Yao Jin, I'll give you 3 seconds to get down." Jean Siming could still smell that sweet scent coming off of Yao Jin. It was overwhelming her nose to the point where she couldn't smell anything else. Her heartbeat inexplicably speeded up, and her cheeks gradually became flushed. Yao Jin slightly tilted her head back and was about to speak when Jean Siming let out a sacred squeak. "Ya!" Jean Siming moved to the side and both of them almost fell to the ground. She found it amusing, and then she sighed and said quietly, "Jean Siming, don't be so nervous, okay? What are you so scared about?" You're the alpha here, so the one that should be at a disadvantage is me, okay? What do you mean I have nothing to be scared about? Although we're both girls, but now that I am an alpha and you're an omega, it's hard for people not to misunderstand you. This is sullying my reputation. Seeing Jean Siming starting to speak incoherently, Yao Jin could only shake her head helplessly. You're so bad at keeping your composure. Hey, focus, you see those yellow mohawks at the school gate? After being jabbed in the side by Yao Jin's elbow a few times, Jean Siming was able to focus and turn her eyes to the school gate. Those blonde-haired delinquents were clearly looking in their direction now. Their mouths opened and closed. It seems they are saying something. Although she couldn't hear what they were saying, she could guess it wasn't anything good if it was coming from their dirty mouths. Jean Siming came back to her senses. You're the reason those yellow mohawks are blocking the path? You wanted me to give you a ride because you wanted to hide from those bad people, is that it? You really didn't have any good intentions when you approached me. Actually, if you had agreed earlier, I wouldn't have to waste so much time here with you. They have seen us tug back and forth already, so now they will definitely think there is some kind of relationship between you and me. Even if you don't drive me out of here today, they will find a way to stop you later when you do leave. If you choose to give me a ride instead, they might take my safety into consideration, and so our chances of escaping will be much better. Jean Siming shivered coldly. Yao Jin is too scary. Compared to her, Jean Siming felt like a stupid pig that was led into a trap, step by step. Jean Siming looked up at the darkening sky and sighed. She leaned forward and gripped her handlebars tightly. Yao Jin was sitting a bit high and the handlebars were positioned relatively low, so when Jean Siming leaned forward, she felt like her entire body was pressing up against Yao Jin. The scent became stronger at this distance and her breathing began shallow as the blush on her face deepened. She straightened up to move away, but Yao Jin suddenly turned around and hooked her neck with her thin arms until they were face to face. What are you doing? Jean Siming froze completely. Your bike gives no sense of safety at all. I'm afraid I'll fall if I don't grab onto something. Even then you shouldn't do this. You're too close. Stop dragging your feet already, hurry up and get us out of here. The sooner we get out, the sooner it will end. Plus this position is also very uncomfortable for me. Yao Jin fidgeted in a dissatisfied manner, as if she was trying to find a more comfortable posture. Jean Siming gritted her teeth. Throwing caution to the wind, she said, stop moving. You better hold on tight, I'm not going to care if you get thrown off. I believe in your driving skills. The bike rushed forward like an arrow released from a bow. Chapter 8. Jean Siming quickly biked down 2 streets before she finally threw the group of yellow mohawks off their tail. The group of delinquents were forced to stop in front of a stoplight. Damn, is that girl a monster? How can she pedal that fast? Xiongji, should we keep chasing? A yellow mohawk wearing a red shirt cursed. The leader had personally witnessed Jean Siming suddenly accelerate a few seconds before the traffic light turned red, crossing the wide intersection like a streak of lighting while they struggled to keep up. Then they were blocked by the sea of endless traffic and stopped by the red traffic light. Forget it, with that girl's explosive power, I'm guessing she should be a high-ranked alpha. With just the few of us, we won't be able to fight her even if we are able to catch up to her. Forget it, let's withdraw for now. After throwing those delinquents off of their trail, Jean Siming continued to pedal before finally stopping in an empty alley. Yao Jin gently jumped off the bike and smiled sweetly at Jean Siming. Thank you, classmate Jean, see you tomorrow. She turned to leave when she finished speaking, but Jean Siming grabbed her sleeves from behind. You're just going to leave like that? Are you not going to at least give me an explanation? Jean Siming stared at the back of Yao Jin's head with an indignant expression on her face. I have already given my thanks, classmate Jean, and you should be able to understand that it was a special situation by now. Is there anything else I need to tell you? Yao Jin turned her head and smiled. Seeing the fake innocence on Yao Jin's face as she smirked made Jean Siming explode in anger. She had risked her safety by getting into this mess between Yao Jin and those delinquents from the vocational high school. But now that she has helped Yao Jin get away smoothly, the evil woman wishes to send her off with just an insincere, thank you. Dream on. Jin Siming let her bike fall to the ground, grabbed Yao Jin by the shoulder, and then pushed her against the wall behind her. Hey! Jin Siming, don't be impulsive. This time it was Yao Jin who was scared. She was really starting to regret her actions as she realized she might have overdone it this time. After all, the other party is an alpha, and if she really gets angry, she could slaughter an omega like a fish on a chopping board. Yao Jin looked at the beautiful face only a few centimeters away from her, and at the pair of long and narrow phoenix eyes, stained red with anger, that was staring fiercely at her. She could smell the other party's pheromones. A faint, somewhat mellow smell, a little like milk. To make matters worse, her heartbeat started to speed up uncontrollably, although she didn't know if it was due to fear or something else. This couldn't go on anymore, and she anxiously wanted to push away the arms holding down her shoulders, but Jin Siming's strength was obviously not something she could just shake off. Just as sweat broke out on her forehead and she prepared for the worst, Jin Siming crouched onto the ground and cried out a wah sound. Are you crying? You're an alpha, so why are you the one crying? Yao Jin stood against the corner of the alley, staring at Jin Siming with a speechless expression. The alpha was pressing her so fiercely against the wall just now, but was now squatting on the ground with her head in her arms and crying like there was no tomorrow. She, as an omega, should be the one crying, right? Woo-woo, why do you always try to hurt me, Yao Jin? And you're always trying to anger me, is it fun to tease me? Those groups of yellow mohawks today looked so violent, yet you dragged me into the dirty waters, with you. Woo-woo, don't you have many big, strong admirers around you? Why not just pick one of them to protect you? Why did you have to pick a delicate girl like me? Woo-woo. Through a curtain of snot and tears, the more Jin Siming said, the more wronged she felt. Although she grew up being the focus of attention due to her good looks, Jin Siming has always been a really good girl. She has never skipped class or gone to internet cafes instead of doing homework, nor has she ever violated any school rules or interacted with any bad students. She has always been a well-behaved student and lived within the boundaries of what she considered to be right and safe. Yet today, because of Yao Jin, she confronted the famously rumored bad students for the first time in her life. Just now, when she was being chased by the group of fierce-looking delinquents with cigarettes dangling from their mouths, her heart almost jumped into her throat. Now that the chase was over, she still felt a little afraid. A delicate girl? Yao Jin said with amusement as she looked at the big alpha squatting on the ground. She carefully chose her words and explained, actually, it was just a coincidence that I bumped into you at the school gates today. I didn't know they would try to confront me when school was over either. Seeing that Jin Siming was still squatting on the ground, her shoulders moving up and down, Yao Jin sighed and leaned against the wall. She then said in a joking tone, you must know as well as I do that if I asked any of the other alphas in the school for help, they would think too much and misunderstand my intentions. It is much easier to ask classmate Jean for help, because I know that you will never develop any strange feelings for me. I let you escort me because I knew that you wouldn't think too much. That's all it was, okay? Jin Siming was once again provoked by her narcissistic and self-praising comments, and stood up with a snort. Do you think everyone is like that crowd of no-class alphas who chase you around every day? I'll sooner fall in love with a cute alpaca * than fall in love with you. T/N, yes, she really did say alpaca, as in the cute llama-looking animal. But you can't drag me into your trouble just because of this, alright? What if those groups of delinquents start targeting me? Yao Jin didn't expect that this idiot would start crying because she was scared of this. The corners of her lips raised and she took 2 steps forward. She blatantly looked Jin Siming up and down with a pair of mocking eyes. What are you looking at? Jin Siming took a few steps back, holding her arms over her chest, and frowned back at her. Jin Siming, do you understand that you are a high-ranked alpha right now? Of course I know. I don't need you to tell me. Then do you also understand that you can knock down 4 of them at once with just 1 punch? You don't even have to move your hands either, since you can just suppress them all with your pheromones. Think about it, why else would I jump onto your bike? She really didn't know about that. Hearing those words, Jean Siming didn't know whether she should feel happy or uncomfortable at her increase in power. She has felt herself become stronger after differentiation, but she has never thought about using her strength for fighting. After all, she has been a proper young lady of good society for 17 years, no, she is still a proper young lady now. You, stop trying to provoke me into a fight. I am an innocent and good student, not at all like you. Jean Siming quickly drew a line between them and expressed her standing as a good student. But Yao Jin's words did have an effect on her, reminding her of her own strength and making her feel less afraid of those yellow mohawks. Her mood returned to normal and she didn't feel like chatting with Yao Jin anymore. She raised her head and glanced at the sun on the horizon that was about to set. She lifted her bike off the ground, jumped onto it, lifted one foot, and then paddled off. Yao Jin didn't stop Jean Siming from leaving, and lowered her head to take out her phone. She texted her chauffeur her location and asked him to come pick her up. She silently leaned against the wall. The unfamiliar alleyway was a little too quiet, making her feel antsy, so she bent over, picked up her bag and decided to walk towards the nearest intersection. Just as she straightened up, Jean Siming, who had just left, appeared in front of her again. She stood against the light, one foot on the ground, the last lights of the setting sun sprinkled over her body like a layer of gold. The curve of Yao Jin's lips widened. Why his classmate Jean returned? Are you worried about leaving me here alone? She wanted to tease her with a few more words, but realized that Jean Siming wasn't exploding like usual. Instead, she maintained a calm face, biting her lower lip with her brows furrowed. After a long period of silence, she said in a hesitant tone, "Hey, you were so close to me just now, so, what does my scent smell like?" Ever since that time in the bathroom where that random girl said her pheromones smelled stinky, Jean Siming has been obsessed over the matter and she wanted to know the true answer. She had smelled Yao Jin's scent earlier, so, in theory, she must have also smelled her scent. Besides, since she has helped Yao Jin so much, it shouldn't be a big deal for her to ask about this stuff, right? Yao Jin let out a pft and then asked, "You returned just to ask this?" "Why yes. So hurry up and tell me." Jean Siming blushed. "Why do I have to tell you?" Yao Jin thought that the current Jean Siming was really interesting. Jean Siming about the promise they had talked about earlier and replied, "You said that if I helped you out, you would fulfill one of my requests. Although I'm letting you off easy, if you answer my simple question I'll consider us even." Yao Jin shrugged, "But when I made that promise, you refused it on the spot so it could be considered as void." "You." Jean Siming got angry, but she knew that she didn't have anything to threaten Yao Jin with, so she switched tactics. "If you tell me, then I can also tell you what your scent smells like." As she said this, her face started flushing for no reason. After hearing this, Yao Jin actually started laughing. "Pfft, ha 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 ha. Classmate Jean, thanks for the offer, but I know exactly what my scent smells like, so I don't need you to tell me." Seeing Yao Jin laugh so much that she was bending over, as if she had heard a big joke, Jean Siming felt she had lost even more of her dignity. That's right, Yao Jin is surrounded by so many alphas every day, so how could she not know what her scent smells like? She didn't bother saying anything more, and took off again without looking back. This time she did not return. Yao Jin looked at her retreating back and chuckled quietly. Even after differentiating, she is still so childish. Author's notes. Our Mingbao is still a baby. Yao Jin is too evil. Chapter 9. For most students, the two hardest classes of the day are the first class in the morning and the last class on Friday. At this moment, Jean Siming is experiencing the first one. She was dizzy with hunger, to the point she felt that her spine would start sticking out. However, she had to pretend she was still listening to her math teacher at the front. His spittle flying as he lectured from the podium. The hunger was just too unbearable, so she secretly tore open some snacks she had prepared beforehand and quietly snacked on some. She lowered her head many times to look at her watch. Every second felt like years. It wasn't so difficult before, but after her differentiation, her appetite increased significantly. No matter how much she eats during breakfast, it will digest completely by this time. At first, she refused to eat in fear of gaining weight and she wanted to prove that she could restrain herself. But reality soon taught her the harsh truth, and as she couldn't bear the hunger either, she had completely let the matter go. Ding dong ding. The bell finally rang and Jean Siming stood up with a squeak of her chair, but then as if she suddenly remembered something, she hurriedly sat back down. She took out a small handheld mirror from under her desk and began to straighten out her hair. Aya, Mingbao, stop staring at yourself. Didn't you say you were hungry? Let's hurry up and go buy the braised pork from the cafeteria. Su Xiaohang saw her wasting time looking at herself in the mirror, and hurriedly urged her as she dragged her friend out of the classroom. Many students ran in the corridor outside towards the cafeteria, and Su Xiaohang wanted to run as well, but Jean Siming forcibly held her back. Stop joking, even if Jean Siming is hungry, she is still somewhat well known at the school, so she still has to walk to the cafeteria with dignity. Ah, Beauty Yao. Jean, are you going to the cafeteria? Yao Jean, you're going to eat in the cafeteria today? Actually, there is one other important reason why she has to walk with dignity, and that is, because Yao Jean is walking right behind her. They have only walked halfway towards the cafeteria, and Jean Siming has heard no less than 10 people greet Yao Jean. Humph, she's like some kind of famous courtesan. Jean Siming couldn't help but bitterly insult her in her heart. Perhaps the group of yellow mohawks yesterday are familiar with Yao Jean and blocked her at the gate yesterday because they had impure motives towards her. Ha, isn't she a wild one for being involved with the people from the vocational high school next door? Jean Siming believed that Yao Jean was the cause of the group of delinquents blocking the gate yesterday. She felt it was not worth taking the risk to help such an unseemly person. Meanwhile, Yao Jean greeted and smiled at others easily, as if yesterday's incident had no impact on her at all. A fire flared up in Jean Siming's heart. Xiaohang, walk faster. She pulled on Su Xiaohang's sleeve and quickened her pace. Didn't you just tell me not to run? Su Xiaohang pouted. I'm telling you to walk faster, not run. The two noisily walked into the cafeteria and saw a long line in front of the window selling braised pork. If they line up now, the pork will be sold out by the time they arrive at the counter. So they instead grabbed a few of the other random dishes and then picked a table to sit down. Woo-woo, my braised pork is flying away and they only serve it on Mondays and Wednesdays. Su Xiaohang frowned as she poked at the rice on her plate. Seeing her so disappointed, Jean Siming quickly piped up, you want to eat braised pork that badly? Then I'll ask Auntie Li to cook a pot of braised pork and I'll bring it tomorrow. Her cooking is super tasty and definitely not worse than what they serve here. Really? Su Xiaohang shyly placed her hands on her face. Mingbao, you talk like a big CEO who is spoiling their little wife. I must say, dash. Shut up. If you say one more word, then tomorrow's braised pork event will be cancelled. Alright, I won't talk anymore. Su Xiaohang hurriedly stopped because she was afraid that tomorrow's braised pork would also fly away. Jean Siming gave her one more glare, afraid she'll hear any more disgusting words fly out of Su Xiaohang's mouth, and then lowered her head to eat her rice while taking out her phone. Ever since becoming an alpha, her message notifications have dropped sharply from 99 plus to about a dozen. There are even a few alphas in her contacts that have blocked her, but she never replied to them in the first place and she doesn't really take initiative to text any of them. Without their constant harassment, her phone has actually become really clean. However, there was still a sense of discontentment in her heart, especially when she compared herself to Yao Jean, who was currently more popular than ever. Fortunately, those who she actually got along with did not actively avoid her just because of her differentiation. Such as Senior Liu. Liu Yi is Jean Siming's senior by 1 year and is in his 3rd year of high school. He is an ordinary person who will never differentiate, so he needs to take the traditional college entrance exam before going to university. Currently, his study schedule is pretty busy. However, even with the pressure of his studies, He still finds the time to send Jean Siming study resources and patiently give her advice. Unlike those superficial alphas who alienated her, he still contacts her frequently. The key point, however, is that Louis is handsome, smart, and has a gentle and sincere personality. Simply the perfect crush in the hearts of all high school girls. Before her differentiation, Jean Siming had a good impression of Senior Lou, but now she is an alpha. Alas, she and Senior Lou are just not meant to be. Mingbao, the person in front over there seems to be Senior Lou. Jean Siming abruptly raised her head and sure enough, Louis was walking towards her. Siming, what a coincidence. I didn't expect to meet you in the cafeteria today. Louis greeted her with a smile as he held his tray. His clean white shirt makes his smile especially charming and sunny today. As Senior Lou? Jean Siming was just thinking about him in her heart, but she never expected they would actually bump into each other within the next second. Her face instantly flushed. Senior Lou, are you by yourself? Would you like to join us? She moved her tray and pointed to the empty seat next to her. Ah, no need. I have an appointment with someone else. You two should enjoy your meal, I'll be leaving first. Bye. Louis had just approached to say hello and left just as abruptly, yet that small little interaction made Jean Siming fall into a daze. Su Xiaohang bit her chopsticks and stared at Lu Yi's retreating back before she sighed. Senior Lou is still so handsome. Of course, he is a strong competitor for the title of school prince. It's a pity that he is an ordinary person that can't differentiate. Su Xiaohang showed a regretful look. What's wrong with ordinary people? Jean Siming frowned. Majority of the people on this planet are ordinary. Differentiation is not necessarily a good thing. True, but you know how we're taking the college entrance exams next year? Ordinary people need to take the National Unified College exam in order to enter universities. The competition is fierce among them. Then do you think that differentiation allows you to sleep every day and enter university without any worries? Even we have to take an aptitude test to evaluate which school we can enter. Jean Siming ruthlessly showed her the harsh reality of things, and Senior Lou's grades have always been excellent, so he doesn't have to worry at all about passing the college entrance exams. That's true. Hey, Mingbao, is the person Senior Lou made an appointment with Yao Jin? Su Xiaohang suddenly pointed behind her. Jean Siming turned towards that direction and sure enough saw Yao Jin sitting there. At this moment, she was sitting face to face with Louis. The two of them seemed to be having a good chat. Crack! The wooden chopsticks in Jean Siming's hand broke in two. TSK, the quality of the school's chopsticks is so bad. I'm going to grab another pair. Jean Siming smiled thinly, ignoring the shocked look on Su Xiaohang's face, and went to grab herself another pair of chopsticks. Yao Jin, oh Yao Jin. You already have a whole pond of fish to choose from. You can do whatever you want to them, but Senior Lou is the most gentle, pure, and kind person. He is different from the rest of them. You better let him go, or else. Crack! Another pair of chopsticks broke in Jean Siming's hand. Chapter 10. The class rep for their history class stood in front of Su Xiaohang, her hand tapping impatiently on the desk. Can you hurry it up? I have to turn in everyone's workbooks to the teacher's office right now. Sweet cheeks, please just wait a little bit longer, I'm almost done. Su Xiaohang hunched over her desk, furiously copying everything from Jean Siming's exercise book to her own. You've only copied up to page 80, which means you still have 6 pages left to copy. I'm guessing you won't be able to finish it before class ends. Just give me Jean Siming's. You can just skip on handing yours in today. Don't do that, babe. Su Xiaohang held Jean Siming's exercise book firmly to her chest. Why don't you wait until the next class is over before handing them in? I'll finish writing it during gym class. No, the last time I did that the teacher scolded me for handing the homework in so late. The class rep refused. My lord, please accommodate this lowly one just this once. If you help me this one time, I'll give you a one-of-a-kind, ultra-exclusive picture of Jean Siming. How about it? It's the only one, after all. I can even throw in the privilege of getting to touch her abs if you want. Su Xiaohang pandered. The class rep for history is a girl and an Omega. Her face turned red at these words, and then she glanced shyly at Jean Siming, hesitating a little bit before she said, Su Xiaohang, will you die if you talk less? Also, hurry it up. I'm only going to wait until the end of gym class at the latest. After saying this sentence, she quickly turned and walked away. Meanwhile, sitting beside her, Jean Siming gave Su Xiaohang a stern glare. Who told you to say such nonsense in my name, and when did I get abs? How come I didn't know about it? Hey, I was just joking, but I never expected it to actually work. Hee, Mingbao, you are quite liked by the Omegas. Should that really be your main focus right now? Jean Siming rolled her eyes. TSK, an alpha like you don't have to care so much about these things. No, wait a minute, why does being an alpha mean I can't care about this? Jean Siming felt the scars in her heart deepen. Ever since she has become an alpha, she seems to have lost her right to be seen as cute and lovable. She was stripped of her role as the damsel in distress and was forced to make many changes she was unwilling to accept. Speaking of changes, she was starting to miss those days where she was allowed to go to the same bathroom together with Su Xiaohang. Su Xiaohang poked her arm. Hey, look at the back door. Jean Siming glanced towards the side and saw 2 to 3 Omegas standing outside the back door, looking at them. When she met their gazes, they quickly moved away from the door and giggles could be faintly heard as they left. TSK. These days all those little O's come to peek at you. Our Mingbao has matured, this old mother's painstaking efforts to pick out your outfits was not in vain. Su Xiaohang patted her shoulders, looking very much like an old mother breathing a sigh of relief at their child finally growing up. Jean Siming shook off her hands, but I never expected my relationship with girls to be so good now. Hey, there was also clearly a cute little male Omega too, okay? Jean Siming recalled for a moment. She did see a cute little boy wearing round-rimmed glasses, with fair and tender skin just now. If it was before her differentiation, she would have felt smug and proud at having so much attention. However, she has always been unpopular with the other girls and Omegas, so the sudden reversal of her reputation made her feel more than a little uncomfortable with the new eyes on her. Mingbao, the next class is about to begin. We should pack up our stuff and go to the track field. After history class is gym class. Su Xiaohang grabbed the history exercise book and followed Jean Siming to the gathering on the track field. Jean Siming rarely participates in sport activities during gym class, and this time is no exception. After the gym teacher took attendance and dismissed them, Jean Siming was about to pull Su Xiaohang off to the side, when the teacher unexpectedly called out to her. Hey, you, the tallest girl in the back row. Yeah, you. Come and help the sports committee carry the sports equipment. Me? Jean Siming pointed at herself in surprise. Usually, this kind of menial labor had nothing to do with her. Yes, you. What are you standing there for? Hurry up. The teacher urged impatiently. And so, under the watchful eye of the class, she moved towards the equipment room. There are some bags over there, you can pack the stuff in there. Grab 3 basketballs, 4 badminton rackets. A sports committee member quickly assigned her to some tasks the moment she walked in. She could only obediently follow her classmates' orders and reluctantly grabbed the equipment while complaining in her heart. She never thought she would be used as free labor one day. After all, she had never done this kind of physical work before. However, when she did finish packing all the equipment into the bags, it wasn't as heavy as she thought. Seeing the confusion and slight dissatisfaction on her face, the sports committee member smiled. The gym teachers usually pick the tallest people to carry the equipment. Before, it was the same few boys, but they left early for a game today. So the tallest one left was naturally you. That's why he called you. She had grown taller after her differentiation, but the only advantage it seemed to have brought her was the 2 words engraved on her face: free laborer. After moving the bags onto the track field, she let out a long sigh of relief. Although she wasn't physically tired, she felt mentally exhausted from the further destruction of her inner beliefs. As soon as the bags were set down, a girl and Yao Jin came over. Aya, why are there no tennis rackets? The girl asked. The sports committee member explained, there are not many tennis rackets left in the storage room. They were already gone when we arrived. Then what should we do, Jin? I can't play tennis with you anymore, but I really want to play. The girl shook Yao Jin's hands in a spoiled manner. Yao Jin smiled gently, no matter, you can use the one I bought. Really? You're so kind, Jin. However, I don't know how to play tennis. No worries, I can teach you. Ah, Jin, you're both beautiful on the inside and outside. You're just too kind. You're so awesome. The Jin Siming, who was standing next to them, felt a strange feeling rise in her heart. She already knew that Yao Jin was very popular, so she shouldn't care, but it seems that Yao Jin is always very kind to everyone she meets, granting whatever anyone asks of her. Is she always so gentle? Although they are bitter rivals and they never wear good expressions when facing each other, isn't this girl a little too much? If it was her, she would have already rejected the girl after not getting any tennis rackets. How come Yao Jin is so good-tempered in the face of such a spoiled girl? Unexpectedly, she felt that the girl was like a thorn in her eyes, and a pretentious faker. With these thoughts in mind, she muttered quietly, if you don't have a racket and don't even know how to play, then why are you even playing in the first place? Stop dragging others down with you. Who would have known that the girl had actually heard her and turned around? It's none of your business. Jin Siming crossed her arms and stared down at her with narrowed eyes. When the girl looked up at the tall statue staring down at her, she shrank back in fright. Meanwhile, Yao Jin had witnessed all of this and her sharp eyes bent a little as she smiled sweetly. Is classmate Jin defending me? Chapter 11. Stop flattering yourself. Jin Siming snorted. In all honesty, she really wasn't familiar with this girl either, and she could be considered a busybody for what she muttered just now. In fact, according to her personality, she doesn't like to talk unless she has to. But for some reason, she just really wanted to insult that annoying girl. Now she felt a little embarrassed and moved to leave, when the scene of today's lunch flashed in her head. She paused her movements and turned her head. Do you know Louis? Which Louis? Yao Jin tilted her head and thought, are you talking about Senior Louis? The one in year 3? Ah, I know him, but why does classmate Jin suddenly follow my social circles? Jin Siming couldn't help but roll her eyes. Yao Jin, will you die if you stop thinking about yourself so much? Why would I pay attention to you? What I care about is... Halfway through her words, she glanced at the girl standing next to Yao Jin. The girl's eyes had widened into 2 copper bells, and the words eating popcorn and watching a good show was written clearly across her face. She abruptly cut off her words. She almost gave away her feelings about her secret crush. Jin Siming glared at the girl. What are you looking at? The girl didn't expect the fire of this argument to suddenly burn towards her, and she choked up. Mingbao, over here. Just then, Su Shahong called out to her. Jin Siming snorted coldly once, but didn't bother continuing this argument, as she took the opportunity to walk away instead. She left Yao Jin and the girl behind, one deep in thought and the other with a befuddled expression on her face. Who were you talking to just now? Su Xiaoheng is nearsighted but doesn't like to wear glasses. She squinted long and hard but couldn't see who was talking to Jin Siming just now. No one, just some ordinary classmates. Jin Siming said nonchalantly. Jin Siming had only wanted to know if Senior Liu Yi and Yao Jin knew each other. After all, she has a good impression of this upperclassman. As for Yao Jin. Jin Siming knows exactly how Yao Jin treats those boys and alphas that always linger around her. In the face of confessions, love letters, and other gifts, the girl never refuses nor makes a clear statement of rejection. She also never takes the initiative or responsibility for others. In short, in Jin Siming's mind, Yao Jin was the highest-ranked demon, and even the great goddess of mercy, Guanyin, would suffer before this demon. So, with these thoughts in mind, Jean Siming felt that it was her duty to guard Senior Lu Yi from such a demon and help him take a few precautions. Su Xiaohand looked down at her phone and read a message that was sent to her. She then grabbed Jean Siming's arm and broke her out of her daydream. Mingbao, let's go to the basketball courts. Jian Xian said to go find her there. Jian Xian is not in the same class as them, but they have the same gym period together and would often group up together for sports activities. When they arrived at the basketball courts, they saw Jian Xian standing next to an unknown girl. In the past, she has always come alone, but today there was someone they didn't recognize with her. Even Jean Siming was a little curious. Long Bach hair, tall and slender with pale skin, double eyelids, and a pair of intelligent eyes. A beautiful person overall, barely 7 out of 10 points. Jean Siming's old habit of giving scores in her heart to potential rivals has relapsed again. Jian Xian quickly pulled the girl towards them when she saw the two approach. What took you two so long? Here, let me introduce this person, her name is Zhou Ziqing. Watch out. Before the introduction could be finished, a wild basketball suddenly flew towards them. The ball was about to brush past the girl's head and then strike directly into Jean Siming's face. So she frantically stepped forward and waved her arm around, slamming the ball to the side. Pa! The ball went flying. She used a little too much force and the basketball flew directly over the fence and landed onto the flowers of the field on the other side. The ball that was rushing towards Zhou Ziqing was deflected, and she clapped her hands together as little stars shined in her eyes. Thank you, classmate Jean. Jean Siming blinked in confusion and explained, I was just afraid that the ball would hit me. Zhou Ziqing lowered her head and bit her upturned bottom lip, and whispered shyly, It's okay, I understand. Jean Siming. No, wait a minute, what do you understand? Girl, are you sure you aren't misunderstanding something instead? Jean Siming was about to clear up the misunderstanding when a strong-looking boy suddenly ran over and stood between them. I'm sorry, did the ball hit you just now? The boy completely ignored everyone else and stood right in front of Zhou Ziqing as he spoke in a gentle tone. This scene seems quite familiar. A light bulb went off inside her head. No wonder she felt this scene was familiar. Before her differentiation, more than one alpha would use this method to start up a conversation with her. In fact, she has developed a bit of a trauma for basketball courts because of this. If you're going to flirt with a girl, then just flirt with her. At least aim a bit and get your target right. How dare you throw a ball at me? Jean Siming clenched her fists. It's all right, classmate Jean stopped the ball for me. Zhou Ziqing looked directly at Jean Siming with starry eyes, completely ignoring the boy beside her. The boy's face darkened as he realized his plan had failed and he glanced in Jean Siming's direction with an unsightly face. However, when he saw her face clearly, his expression instantly changed. Siming? Jean Siming was stunned for a moment as she recognized the boy as Zhao Yang. Then she quickly recovered and smiled nastily. So, it turns out to be him. No wonder he used this trick again. This Zhao Yang was actually one of the several alphas who secretly blocked her after her differentiation. Zhao Yang had a secret crush on Jean Siming before, but he never expected Jean Siming would differentiate into an alpha that was not only taller than him, but also higher ranked than him. One must know that ranks are important between alphas. A higher-ranked alpha can easily use their pheromones to suppress a lower-ranked alpha. Zhao Yang could not accept such a change in his former crush and so he quietly blocked Jean Siming's number. And now he felt embarrassed seeing her here. The person who he wanted to flirt with not only ignored him, but was also staring at Jean Siming with hard eyes. The humiliation was too much and so he quickly left to go find his ball instead. However, he looked around and couldn't find a hint of his basketball. He could only bite the bullet and ask, Siming, did you see where my basketball fell? Jean Siming pointed at the field on the other side of the fence, over there. Zhao Yang. Looking at Zhao Yang's embarrassed back, Jean Siming's only regret was that she didn't smash the ball away hard enough. After this little incident, Su Xiaohang led the group to a little pavilion in the school's garden. She still had homework to copy and the pavilion was shaded and cool, so the others followed without objection. On the way to the pavilion, Zhou Ziqing kept chatting nonstop with Jean Siming, asking her this and that, and annoying the hell out of Jean Siming. However, for her friend Jian Xian's face, she held back her annoyance and patiently answered each question. Fortunately, the girl had other things to do and left after a while. Once the noisy little bird left, Jean Siming breathed a sigh of relief and then glared at Jian Xian. Jian Xian sighed, alright, I'll confess. Zizi and I are both fans of the same star, and I wasn't able to get a ticket for said star's concert. But she said she could get me a ticket if I. Su Xiaohang raised an eyebrow, if you sold out our Mingbao? Jian Xian quickly defended herself, what, don't say such nonsense. Zizi only wanted to get to know our Mingbao a little. AI, forget it. Seeing so many little OS chase after our Mingbao, this old mother actually feels very relieved. Su Xiaohang smiled teasingly and quickly dodged Jean Siming's slap on the head as she quickly changed the subject. By the way, White Day is coming up soon. What are you going to do about it? Jian Xian replied blankly, what is there to do? Aren't they holidays that are only celebrated by the popular good-looking people? Su Xiaohang also lamented her unpopular fate, and then bowed her head to get to copying her homework. Hearing them talk about these holidays, Jean Siming sighed inwardly. In the past, these kinds of holidays would become a silent battle between her and Yao Jin. They would secretly compete to see who received the most gifts on Valentine's Day, but this year, she can only hope she won't be too humiliated. Chapter 12. Jean Siming stood at the door of the classroom with a bucket and a mop and a bitter look on her face. Today is her turn to be on cleaning duty, and, since it was an extensive cleaning, she needed to clean both the inside and outside of the classroom. After all, the student council will be checking their cleaning today, so everyone in her group is responsible for doing more work than usual to clean this place up. In the past, whenever she was on duty, she would barely lift a thing as throngs of boys would rush to help her. Now, however, she has to do everything herself, and not only that, she is also assigned to the most physically intense part of the cleaning, mopping the floors. Just because she's an alpha. She sighed for the nth time and lifted her mop, dipping it into the water bucket as she began mopping row by row, from left to right. By the time she made it to the fourth row, she stopped in her tracks. This is because several girls are standing in her way, blocking the floor of the fourth row. She couldn't maneuver around them as there is no space to do so. In the center of their little huddle is Yao Jin's seat. At this moment, the girl in question is surrounded by 3 to 4 other girls, and there are bottles and jars of cosmetics lying on her desk. Lining picked up a lipstick sitting on Yao Jin's table and opened it gently. She let out an envious sigh. I've been wanting to buy this shade of lipstick for such a long time, but it's just too expensive. I've been reluctant to buy it. Yao Jin smiled at her, and seeing that the girl seemed to really like the lipstick, she said, if you like it that much, then I'll just give it to you. It just so happens that I haven't used that one yet. Lining held the lipstick tightly in her hand, feeling a little excited. Really, Jean? But this lipstick is quite expensive. Forget it, I shouldn't. Yao Jin didn't seem to mind. This is nothing. Your birthday is in a few days, right? Just treat it as an advance birthday present from me. After hearing this, Lining jumped up happily and wrapped Yao Jin into a hug. The group of girls enthusiastically continued to discuss cosmetics, and Jean Siming just happened to hear this little snippet as she approached. Although she hates Yao Jin to the bone, she has to admit that she really can't be like Yao Jin. For not only is the hateful woman popular with the opposite sex, she is also very popular among the same sex. Meanwhile, Jean Siming has a cold temperament when meeting new and unfamiliar people, and rarely takes the initiative to make new friends. Before her differentiation, the people around her didn't care how cold her attitude was due to her beautiful face. Alphas would still flock to her and try to curry favor with her, but as for the same sex, except for Su Xiaohang and her little group of friends, her relationship with the same sex was really bad. One time, a girl got really jealous when her crush fell in love with Jean Siming instead. She insulted her on the school message boards and almost slapped her because of it. The entire debacle was traumatizing to the point that she still feels uncomfortable just remembering about it. On the other hand, Yao Jin is not only popular with the alphas, but with the omegas and other ordinary girls. This is not only due to her cheerful personality, but her lavish spending habit and her constant gift-giving. This Lenning doesn't seem to be a very sincere person. Was it really necessary to spend so much money on those materials to maintain these fake friendships? Does she simply enjoy the feeling of being surrounded by fans like a movie star? With these thoughts in mind, Jean Siming snorted disdainfully and picked up her mop and loudly tapped it on the ground a couple of times as she shouted impatiently, "Hey, excuse me, I'm mopping here. Please get out of the way." A few water droplets accidentally splashed onto the calves of two of the girls. They screamed indignantly and turned around angrily, but quickly changed expressions when they saw it was Jean Siming holding the mop. They looked at each other and then quickly walked away without saying anything. With these annoying obstacles removed, Jean Siming continued her work and went back to mopping the floor. In her mind, she exclaimed her pleasant surprise at these girls' attitudes. They treated her much better than she thought they would. She thought they would at least give her an eye roll or two before leaving. By the time she reached Yao Jin's desk, the girl was still sitting in her chair and slowly cleaning up her pile of cosmetics. Today, Yao Jin is wearing a pair of white shorts, revealing a pair of slender and smooth legs, with a pair of AJs on her feet. At this moment, that pair of smooth and slender legs are crossed over each other, beneath the desk. Jean Siming's mop couldn't reach beneath the desk with those legs in way, so she knocked her fist against the desk. "Please get up. I need to mop the floor." "Okay." Yao Jin lifted her eyelids and lazily glanced up at her once and then returned her focus to her cosmetics. She didn't bother getting up and instead simply raised her legs up into the air. Jean Siming. Since Yao Jin wasn't getting up, Jean Siming could only hurriedly mop the floor beneath that desk before leaving. She turned to leave when she suddenly heard Yao Jin gasp. She turned her head only to see Yao Jin jump up from her seat and rush towards her with those long legs. Jean Siming was so frightened that she quickly took 2 steps to the side to avoid a collision. Jean, what's wrong?" A few boys hurriedly came over and asked. "A cockroach." Yao Jin stood next to Jean Siming, her pretty face turning white with fright. "So it turns out it's a cockroach? Don't be afraid, I'll catch the little thing for you." "It'll be alright, Jean, leave it to me. I'll immediately send that little bug to heaven." "That's right, don't be afraid. You have us here." The boys immediately volunteered to help kill the bug and save the damsel in distress. Soon enough, a group of people huddled in front of Yao Jin's desk again as they launched the operation to hunt down the evil cockroach. Meanwhile, Yao Jin's heart was still beating furiously in fright and she clutched her chest, subconsciously taking a few steps closer to Jean Siming, who was standing next to her. However, Jean Siming, feeling that a certain someone was getting too close to her, quickly moved to the side and widened the distance between them. Yao Jin raised her head and gave her a look. Jean Siming quickly turned her head away from the look Yao Jin was sending her. Did she see a few traces of anger in Yao Jin's usually smug fox eyes? But before she had much time to think about it, the insect-catching brigade suddenly moved. She watched as the cockroach spread its wings and quickly flew out of the encirclement with a loud buzz. It just so happened that the bug was flying in Jean Siming's direction. Yao Jin reacted first, and she screamed as she hid behind Jean Siming. However, Jean Siming is also afraid of cockroaches. Just like Yao Jin, she screamed and then turned around to run out the door. But Yao Jin was standing behind her and her sudden turn almost caused the two to collide. The buzzing sound of wings was getting closer behind her. Jean Siming felt the hair on the back of her neck stand on edge and before she had time to even think, she grabbed Yao Jin by the shoulder and half-carried, half-dragged the other person to the door with her. The skin against her hands is smooth and soft, and Yao Jin was much lighter than she thought. Jean Siming suddenly thought of her grandmother's beautiful little rag doll. If that cat had pheromones, it would probably smell like this person. This is Jean Siming's third time smelling Yao Jin's pheromones. She can finally distinguish what the scent is. The scent is like white peach-flavored fruit wine. She quite liked the scent of peach wine, and couldn't help but lower her head for a closer sniff. By the time she returned to her senses, she realized she had already brought the other person to the door. Her heart froze and she quickly released her hands and took 2 steps backwards. But Yao Jin wasn't paying attention to Jean Siming. She is still scared of the big cockroach she had seen by her feet. She really was frightened, and she still hasn't recovered yet. So no matter what Jean Siming did to her now, she wouldn't care as she closed her eyes and lowered her head, not daring to move even a muscle. When Yao Jin feels unsafe, she likes to attach to the nearest thing she could find. Now that Jean Siming has backed away from her, she could only lean against the doorframe and then carefully opened her eyes to look into the classroom. The class was in disarray as there was a burst of screaming everywhere the cockroach went. Finally, several boys joined forces to drive the bug out of the windows, before slamming it shut and calming everyone down. Jean, it's all right now. You can safely come back now. A boy waved his arms with an exhausted expression. Yao Jin breathed a sigh of relief and softly murmured her thanks to Jean Siming before returning to her seat. Meanwhile, Jean Siming stood in the same place, frozen and in a daze. Is her ears playing tricks on her? Did Yao Jin really thank her? And there seemed to be a rare bit of sincerity and friendliness in that soft "thank you" just now. This seems to be the first time they've had a normal conversation without mocking or insulting each other. Furthermore, she felt like she had seen a secret side to Yao Jin. For example, when frightened, the girl would become very quiet and obedient. After Jean Siming finished cleaning the corridor outside the classroom's door, she checked off her last task and washed her mop before placing it back into the storage unit full of cleaning supplies. She returned to her desk, but the rest of her group that was on cleaning duty had not finished yet. So she propped her chin in one hand and stared lazily at the clouds outside the window. As soon as she started to daydream, her daze was interrupted by Zhang Hao sitting in the empty desk in front of her. He flashed a smarmy smile at her. "Bro, your arm strength is awesome." Jean Siming rolled her eyes. "Don't call me bro. She despised when people used masculine terms for her. Zhang Hao shrugged. Known as the human PHS*, Zhang Hao is notorious for being the most gossipy boy in class 14. *T/N, PHS equals Personal Handyphone System, was a mobile network system that used to operate in China until 2013. He only talks to other people for 2 reasons, 1, to gossip, or 2, to dig up gossip. Jean Siming didn't think he was here to gossip with her, but she also didn't have any gossip for him to dig up in the first place. So she gave him an incredulous look. "What arm strength?" Zhang Hao sked and then leaned over, both hands placed flat on her desk. "Mingzi, don't try to hide it. That cockroach just now may have thrown the class into chaos just now, causing everyone to not pay attention, but I saw everything." He stood up, gesturing with his hands to pantomime an embrace. He winked at Jean Siming and said, "You were so fierce just now when you carried our beauty Yao out of the classroom. Fortunately, Li Yang's group of alphas didn't see you, otherwise they'll die of jealousy." I never expected little Mingzi to become so cool after differentiating. To think everyone used to treat you like a little princess and throw affection at you left and right. Now the little princess has become a hero who saves the beautiful damsel in distress. Yeah. It's a little hard to digest, huh? The corners of Jean Siming's mouth twitched. Why does she have the feeling that he was deliberately rubbing salt in her wounds? She lamented silently to herself. He is indeed the most gossipy boy in their class. He won't ever miss a single piece of gossip, and not only can he sniff out gossip, he likes to spread it around everywhere. Jean Siming interrupted his monologue with a dark face. "That's because she was in the way. I only pushed her out of the way, alright?" Zhang Hao waved his hand and dismissed her explanations. "I saw the 2 of you talking during gym class. I knew I felt something weird between you 2 lately." I can smell the traces of gossip in the air. As a classmate, how can I be worthy of my human PhS title if I don't dig out this information firsthand? Seeing that he wasn't going to stop anytime soon, Jean Siming stood up and moved to leave. Hey, don't leave now. I have another piece of gossip that involves you. Would you like to hear it? Zhang Hao quickly stopped her. Jean Siming was getting impatient. If you have something to say, then spit it out and leave. Zhang Hao coughed and dramatically began. Yesterday, our second-year Yang Ji, that is Yang Xing, suddenly asked me about you. Ask about me? Jean Siming was at a loss. Why did he ask about me? I don't know him. I'm not too sure, but I heard that some people from the vocational high school next door blocked Beauty Yao at the gate. Yang Ji then took a group of people with him to retaliate against those delinquents, but for some reason neither side threw a fist, and later he came to me to ask about you. Jean Siming's heart dropped and raised her head. And then what? Zhang Hao smiled. And then he didn't ask me any more questions after I told him you are an S+ rank alpha. Mingming, don't worry, you are our school's only S+ alpha. Even if Yang Ji wanted to bother you, he must first consider the consequences. Even Jean Siming has heard a little bit about Yang Xing. After all, he is quite a famous student in their school. Coming from a rich family, his parents have donated a lot of money to the school. He is the very picture of your average rich second generation, and he is one of Yao Jin's most high-profile suitors. He also often gets into fights in Yao Jin's name. Jean Siming didn't want to have anything to do with such a person. Her mind was a mess. Zhang Hao said something else before she left, but she couldn't hear anything over her mounting anxiety. After thinking about it, she concluded that this was all Yao Jin's fault. If it weren't for that woman, she wouldn't be targeted by this Yang Xing. She scolded Yao Jin 10 times over in her heart. She even drew an evil-looking villain on a piece of paper, writing Yao Jin's name under the doodle and then poking a few holes into the paper to reduce her anger. Suddenly, the phone in her pants pocket vibrated a few times. Louis, what kind of flowers do girls usually like? Flowers? Why did he suddenly ask about this? Could it be? Jean Siming, for senior to suddenly ask me about this, is it because White Day is coming up? Louis, ahem, I've been seen through, laughing crying emoji.jpg. If he chose to ask her this, then the recipient of these flowers will most definitely not be her. Jean Siming raised her head and glanced at Yao Jin. Seeing that evil woman talking and laughing with another alpha, she lowered her head and pursed her lips. Jean Siming, who gifts flowers nowadays? It's better to gift some grass instead, and dogtail grass has become very popular recently.